Welcome back for the final time to Dynamic Character Productions recap of Monte Carlo. Our second long game had to come to an end, but I am happy to dissect these past 2 weeks, including the finale, with two special guests, two DCP legends in their own right. Our first guest, she's the master editor, filmer, coordinator of everything that we do here. It's McKenna Feeney. McKenna, what are your reactions to the end of Monte Carlo?
I'm happy and sad all at the same time. It was a great season and I loved it. It was so fun to watch, but I'm ready for my break.
Well, make sure that break's short. We got another mini to edit.
I know.
And then, of course, down here with us is our master, mayor, whatever you want to call, of the exits. It's Lilly Petzold. Lilly,
Hello.
Are you ready to crack into these last 3 episodes?
I'm ready to crack into it. There's a lot to get into here.
Yeah, because you can bring your experience from what you went through here in these last 3 episodes.
I don't think anybody wants that, to include myself.
But yeah, Lilly, being from the first long game, and then obviously you've been DCP this whole time, but specifically for that long game, is it weird now that you've officially you, Alex, Simmons, you've officially handed the crown over to Monte Carlo? It's now their time to shine. What's that reaction been like for you, especially watching this end game of sort of seeing a new group of people finally finish this journey?
Yeah, I think honestly, there couldn't have been a better cast, in my opinion, to follow Exile. I think this cast was very dynamic, very engaging.
Dynamic?
Whoa.
Someone said the magic word.
We need a buzzer.
Where's Ian with the horn?
Yeah. But it was a great cast, and of course it was great to just watch Final Tribal and not be there. It was really a great season, and I was happy how it ended. A great winner. I don't want to skip the gun or whatever it's called.
The gun.
Skip the gun.
I think that the winner is well deserving and a great representation of the season of Monte Carlo as well.
For sure. And that's we take our casting process very, very seriously. And I was very pleased with our cast overall, especially how we got to that end game. And let's jump right into it. So we start at episode 13. I'll take safety. That was obviously said by Jonathan. Mm-hmm. I liked this episode because it's always interesting when you have a season where a pretty much an alliance that was made into post-merge finds its way all the way to the end, and now your only choice is to cannibalize from within. The issue being that while some people are like, oh, now we're going to start cannibalizing within, like a McKenna, there was already things happening around her without her truly knowing. She had her suspicions, but you couldn't know until the votes are your name and you go out. So it was sort of heartbreaking for me watching her go through this episode where she does feel like there's a chance. She was Serpone loyal, maybe to a fault for her game. But honestly, at that point, even if she wasn't Serpone to the end, I don't know for her in this specific situation if there was ever going to be some leeway for her to get past this round unless she won immunity.
So I find a lot of correlations with this episode and Exile. So Exile, since Austin won immunity at Final 5, Glam had to cannibalize their own. And who was the biggest threat there? Greg. Who was the perceived biggest threat by the jury there? McKenna. So there's a lot of, I feel, correlations between these specific 2 episodes.
No, I agree entirely. And Lilly, I'm sure you watching these episodes, we're seeing a lot of parallels just from your own personal experience, your end game of Exile to here.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the episodes that is fueled by a lot of emotion that I feel like the viewer doesn't really get hands-on experience with, right? We have Victoria, who has her head on straight, who knows like her and McKenna's game is too similar. There's really not much further that she can go with McKenna. So that kind of getting Victoria on her side wasn't there. What I think is interesting is kind of Connor's role in the end final five. And we talk about it in his exit that he played a very isolated game, and had maybe McKenna had picked up Connor maybe even just 1 or 2 votes ago and had kind of gotten her under her wing, it might have gone differently for her. But at this point, we only see Jonathan try to make that connection with him. So it's interesting to see how he plays a big role in these votes without like moving the chess pieces himself.
I don't think Connor was ever getting McKenna, because Connor wanted McKenna out at like merge. So I don't think there was ever a situation where McKenna could be like, all right, listen, Connor, like it's finally the time where he can write McKenna's name down on parchment. And he's just like, yeah, deaf ears.
Yeah. But I think McKenna would have been the only one at that point in the game to convince Jonathan, or to convince Connor to go against Jonathan. I think at Final Four, it was too far gone. I think this was the time that if anybody would have gotten Jonathan out, it was then. But I guess he was safe, so doesn't really
he was safe this round. And we'll get to next episode and what I think could have happened, but people chose just not to. And it's fair in that instance. But we do this challenge now, and this is our first attempt at doing that Survivor style challenge where you go to different locations where you had to count all these items. We made it a little more complicated with camera angles and stuff like that. I chose the easy one, which was just a still shot of the Canadian hating US currency.
Well, Lilly also got the easy one of just the logos.
But
I still got questions though.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But this is like our first attempt at trying to do something that was as close to what you would actually do in real Survivor. Mm-hmm. And while the filming for this did take a while, because it was hard, we made it hard on purpose. We wanted the person to win this challenge, earn that win. Mm-hmm. And overall, I felt it was a big success. I thought it was very cool. It must have been extremely difficult to edit just because there's so much just raw footage.
I honestly didn't know what to do. I was like, clip. All right. That was it.
But so we do see collaboration in this, and essentially everyone's collaborating in some form with each other except for McKenna. No one's sharing any information with McKenna because they're all like, McKenna needs to go. McKenna has to lose. And everyone's like, I don't care who wins unless it's them, except Connor. Connor wants to win, but he's just guessing randomly and not understanding what the rooms were. So was always wrong.
He was too impatient. And as someone who can't sit through things, but I'm damn competitive. So like, just slow your roll, Connor. Let the videos like zoom out and go to another screen, because I believe it was John who was in the poker chips. He was just like, Connor came in and just left before John could even like have the video rotate to see all the other poker chips. And I think he came into the room and Morgan had announced like, Connor has submitted 3 answers. All 3 of them are wrong.
No, there's a spot in here where they said he has submitted an answer for all 5.
Oh, yeah.
And all 5 are wrong. And we do see that with John at the very beginning, where Connor comes in and you hear something in the background. John goes, I hope that's not paper, Connor. Connor says something. And I didn't even know what he said. And then suddenly he's gone. It's just like, wait, where is he? And then you cut to him in my room counting the Benjamins. But so Lilly, what were your thoughts about like this challenge, like how it came across on the episode? Like, just what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, these are my favorite type of challenges, to be honest, where there are multiple different sections. You get the fake running back and forth with the Zoom. And I think in the room, it was interesting to see if there was collaboration, like you mentioned, because I was wondering, are people more apt to collaborate because the other people can't see them if they're not in the room collaborating? I wonder if that played an effect, whereas in Real Survivor, you can kind of look around. I mean, I'm assuming to a certain extent and see, or hear if somebody's helping somebody else. So I wonder, like, in a perfect world, if you could scoop them out and put them on the Fiji island, would they have collaborated just as much? Would be interesting to find out, but it was really cool to watch, and people had a lot of funny things to say throughout it too.
So we're on the beaches of France here. We're in Monte Carlo, like
exactly. Or they're like in the, I don't know.
They're just in a casino running.
Yeah, they're just in the casino.
Yeah.
They're in all the different rooms. No, not the high rollers room though. That's been closed. But it was interesting seeing the collaboration, because sometimes with those challenges, it's like the only one person can be in there at a time. But with this one, it's sort of a, hey, play smart, like don't play hard. But ultimately, we do see Jonathan get the win, his first and only immunity win of the season.
Hey, it's better than some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good on him. It gives him a little resume point, because at this point, the jury still doesn't truly know Jonathan's game yet.
It's maddening. I mean, yes, as production, we get so much behind the scenes of everything, but it's just flabbergasted that no one could see like how ingrained he is and knowledgeable of everything that went on.
Well, so like the issue here was, and it's not an issue on anyone's part, it's just the issue of the bigger picture, is you had 5 people, and I truly haven't seen this before, where you had 5 people who are making up the final 5 who, for one way or another, all are playing under the radar games. When you have 5 people that are all playing under the radar games, the jury's going to be very confused about like, what did people actually do? And then at that point, you're voting more so on just like, well, who did I like the best while I was in there? And you had people saying in Ponderosa, like, I like Jonathan. I don't know what he did, so he would need to explain what he did, but I like him. And then you have people like, they said so many times, Michael's a threat. If he goes to the end, he'll win. McKenna's a threat. If she gets to the end, she'll win. Everyone likes her, which is funny because you juxtapose that with McKenna always just going, I have horrible jury management. Like, I'm pretty sure all of them hate me. And really, like, all of them most likely would have leaned towards her going into Final Tribal if she was there. Which, I mean, like, hey, we all have those moments. Like, we all have those. Like, it's sort of like self-confidence of, I know when I've played games, I'd be like, oh, if I get to the end, I ain't getting one vote. Like, my game's trash. But we all know McKenna, and we love her, and she was the correct vote this round. Like, for all
McKenna's are never correct votes. Just gotta say.
Past history says otherwise. Anyway, but yeah, so ultimately we do see McKenna's game come to an end. Once again, Michael is in his Romeo form of, I'm the backup vote. I know that I'm the person that's going to be receiving the end. But I sort of like what he sort of says in his Final Tribal about how, like, voting for him was almost like the kiss of death. Because like, if you vote for him, you're going home.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of anything. It's just like, oh, you think I'm going home. But every time someone thinks I'm going home, one of you is actually going, and I'll still be sitting here. And McKenna going here, and no one really heeding on Kiley's like warnings of Michael being a endgame threat, locks his spot in essentially at that point into getting to the final 3, because he was very good. You hear the conversations with Jonathan about like, I'm willing to go 2-3 with you and Victoria as we intended, but if we need to do us 2 and Connor, I'm also fine with that. And for whatever reasons, which is still unknown to me, even with the exits of Connor not willing to touch Jonathan at all, it was sort of just like this perfect storm for Michael to get to the end.
Yeah.
And I think Jonathan probably created final 2 with he had a final 2 with everyone in the final 5.
Yeah. And
so
I mean, like
he was solidly at, like, that's why Connor didn't want to touch him, Michael didn't want to touch him, Victoria didn't want to touch him.
Yeah.
But I think that the big issue here though was, while everyone else was like wanting to stay true to these final 2s that they were creating, Like Jonathan was playing more that he comes across like more gamer. Like he has emotions. Like he does feel for people as he's filling them out, but he's sort of like when it comes to the vote ultimately, it doesn't matter if he made a final two of you. If
you're on his list.
Yeah, if you're on his list, or if he thinks that you could potentially steal votes away from him, or enough votes that he couldn't win a plurality of them, you got to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think other people in this 5 couldn't make that same decision. Like because they all you hear them all say like, oh, like Jonathan may be pulling the wool over my eyes, or like, I know if I go to the end with Jonathan, I have a hard chance of beating him, but I'm still going to do it anyway. It's sort of just fascinating to watch how all of them react to the same situation.
Mm-hmm. But I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Like they all, I think at this point in the game, they think they're all pretty much on a semi-equal playing field. They all have been playing under the radar games. And I think a lot of the players like Connor were going based off of what he had been hearing from others, that, you know, McKenna was a threat. I think he was worried that Victoria and him had the same arc, even though Connor was not good at displaying his arc, right? That we see him from Exile to Monte Carlo. And I think had he been able to kind of express it in the way that he found intimidating for Victoria and put himself in that spot, he would have, you know, gotten more people leaning his way, because there is some validity to that fear as well. So you're right, it is interesting, but they all kind of are playing the same game, which makes it harder to differentiate yourself and figure out who is the real threat here, if really no one on the jury knows, nor the person you're sitting next to knows your game, you know?
Right. Absolutely. And with that, though, we do see McKenna ultimately go here at 5th place. I think for a first-time player, like, she played amazing. Had
Those
a very
bad bitches.
The Bad Bitch Book Club keeps providing very high-quality players, especially when it comes to their social game. And this season, more so than not, I forget who said it, but it was on another one of our recordings where someone said how Exile Island, it was a lot more, I feel, a mix of strategy and social, but like I feel like it leaned more strategy.
Mm-hmm.
This season I felt was very dominant and like a good representation of what happens when you have a bunch of above average social people play this game. And I think McKenna was a very good example of that.
Yes.
Any final thoughts on McKenna as a player? Production McKenna.
I was rooting for her for obvious reasons. And I was so happy she got to the end, and she is just a phenomenal player, and I can't wait to have her back on our screens again, because I will make it happen.
Well, I mean, like, also as a little production side note here, a lot of us in production, just for the fun of it, we also created fantasy teams for the draft. We could pick whoever we wanted. I hate doing fantasy drafts for our orgs because, like, I don't want to have favorites. So I told McKenna to just auto-generate a wheel and create my team. And I only made one change, and it was to add McKenna to my team, and she was the highest placing person of that team. So I think I knew something going into this season with her.
Yeah, right?
I had a good feeling about it. But that ends her game. She goes in 5th place, and in, as you said, in the Greg spot.
Yep.
A good spot to be in. That's good company.
It is a good spot.
Yeah. But now we move to Final 4, episode 14. I can't let that happen. A very heartbreaking episode for all of us here at DCP. This episode, we do see the end of Queen Victoria's second game. I will say it wasn't even bittersweet. I still had a sweet satisfaction in her story, even though she doesn't get to the end. I felt like she got out of this almost everything that she should have had the opportunity to get in Exile. So I was very happy for her. Wasn't happy about this episode result. So let's get into it.
To 4th place. I mean, hey, what more could you ask for?
Mhm.
It's also sort of funny because Victoria and Connor go out back to back in exile.
Mhm.
And so their placements are Victoria first and then Connor one spot ahead. And we end up in this season, same thing, different placement,
Yeah,
but
right.
Victoria goes out and then at fourth and Connor gets third place.
Mhm.
It's sort of just funny how some of those things work. Like, are we destined in any DCP game that they're both in that Victoria will go one spot behind Connor?
Hey, who
Who
knows?
knows?
Third time's charm.
Yeah,
Figure
but
it out.
so we go into final form. We're immediately just like going into the speculating of, oh, we might be getting a quiz-based comp if we're doing a final three
Fallen
this season.
comrades.
And that is exactly what happens. And we have Connor, who says in his exit that like he was playing a very isolated game, didn't have his social game, wasn't there, unfortunately. And you had Jonathan, who was comparing notes with both Victoria and Michael.
Mhm.
You have all this happening. It is the fallen comrades. And by 1 point, Connor edges out that final immunity win.
Crazy, because all season we were hearing Connor is the king of 5-minute Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And it's like he's the guy who knew the most out of everyone. And like that is shocking. Where like he was able to grasp and pick up what he needed to win this comp.
Right. And like I went into this when we were filming, I was like, oh, it's a lock. Michael's winning this. Like that just was my belief going into it. Was I felt Michael had that energy going behind him and he was going to pull out this win and sort of prove everyone that like, oh, Kiley was right. Like you should have taken me out when you had the chance. Like it's the very Thanos moment of like, you should have aimed for the head.
Yeah.
Instead you kept like giving me little like slices across the arm with votes, but hey, I'm still here. I'm still able to snap my finger. But ultimately, we see Connor edge out that win. It's crazy.
Mhm.
Everyone, including the jury, just like, how was it that Connor was the one who won this? He
Yeah.
barely knows us.
Yeah. And I think that took the other 4 down in the jury's eyes as well, because this kid, this 17-year-old kid who was on calls with us like rarely, he knew us more than you did.
So, like, I'll just say personally, from my side of things with this comp, like, if I'm someone on the jury, I don't take any of this as like an indictment on whether or not you would get my vote, because let's be real, like 39 days is a long time and you get to know people very well. I'm friends with everyone on DCP. There's a lot of things I forget very easily because it's just not stuff that's top of mind. Like you learn this stuff and you'll communicate, but it's not like if I'm like talking to someone and I forget like, oh, how many brothers or sisters do they have? Like, oh, I can go check Facebook real quick. But it's like, it's not something I'll know off the top of my head. Be like, oh, when's my mother's birthday? What instrument do I play? Sure, I have the picture of it behind me for John, or the flag if you're Mike, Kevin, Rick, the man of 3 names. But like I wouldn't personally bring it down because I don't expect myself to remember that type of information because it's very specific. And in the moment, in a high pressure comp, like it's very easy to mess up. Lilly,
Yes.
you have experience there.
One.
You won this, but you have experience here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with McKenna. I think that there are people that, especially again, as we've talked about with these people going into final tribal, if you don't know people's games, you might be going off of who you like the most. And if you're sitting here saying, I love Jonathan or I loved Michael, we spent so much time talking, interacting, and then they don't know your sister's name or where you went to college or any of those things that, just leaves your mind, it can have an impact. I think the hardest thing about this challenge is when you're doing it, you're not focusing on the people you know, you're focusing on the people you don't know. Like, I remember when I did this, I wasn't focusing on what I knew about Greg or what I knew about Mackenzie. I was thinking, well, what do I know about Austin, and does this apply to him? You know, what could I be missing, instead of focusing on what I know, which can really throw you off when you don't have that much time. But I think what is good about these challenges that we talked about is you can kind of look at the jury and see like head nods or like reactions. And not to say that Connor was like focusing on that, but if you're kind of just more aware of what's happening on your screen, you might get a couple more tips. Whereas if you're in your head playing, you don't as much, like the tuba that we mentioned that no one on Exile, or the jersey or flag that nobody noticed on Monte Carlo. So it's interesting because, like you said, a lot of it that they were asked on Monte Carlo, you couldn't find on their Facebook. So it was nice that it put everyone kind of on an even playing field. So the one person that didn't study did win, which was kind of cool to see.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so with Connor's say, now the question immediately goes to, well, is it Michael or Victoria? Because we're immediately told that Jonathan's not on the table. He's not open for discussion. And that's where I have an issue. McKenna, you've watched the most recent season of Australian Survivor.
I have. If you want to hear me talk about it, become a specials patron where John and I talk about the most recent Australian Survivor season. Yes, continue, Alex.
So I'm not going to say what ultimately happens there, but there is a discussion in that final four vote of doing a split of a 2-1-1, like ultimately getting people to go against each other, but still ultimately the two people in the middle being the decision makers instead of being the people up to go. They can control their fate. And I think Michael and Victoria missed an opportunity here, but it may be due to Jonathan's ability to once again have that shield in front of him. Have like Victoria and what do people that are still in the game value as like, oh, this is why I would get someone to win. And Michael is someone who does think about some of the extraneous parts of the game, like immunity wins and idols or advantages that you find and are able to use. And he's looking at Victoria like, well, she's won two things and found an idol. Jonathan's only won a comp. Me and him are comparable, but maybe if I'm able to, express my game in Final Tribal better than him, I edge out and win. Whereas in all their opinions is, well, I would vote for Victoria if I was voted out here. So then everyone else must be thinking the same way as me.
I think with bringing Jonathan, in Michael's opinion, he's less kind of splitting the same votes and more I either have their vote or I don't, where I feel like if he brought Victoria, like Margaret, who, loved Victoria, hated writing her name down, but also could be a vote for Michael. You have Parker, who got close with Victoria, but also we see he gave his vote for Michael. So like with eliminating Victoria from being there, he has the possibility to gain more votes rather than split them.
And the other thing I want to bring, like, I know, Lily, you love doing your scenarios. I also love doing scenarios. In a world where, let's say that in this scenario, Victoria wins immunity here. Connor in his exit said that he believes 100% Michael would have been the one to go because Victoria wouldn't put his name down. However, we do see in a couple in the episodes, it was either in 11 or 12, she and Jonathan have this specific conversation of, I think if we're at 4 with these two people, we have to vote out Connor because I don't think they will respect us if we keep bringing him along. So I actually believe in a world where Victoria is safe, Connor does go there. Like, I think it would be a 3-1 vote where he throws a vote on Michael thinking everyone else is going to do that too, and then gets shocked when no one else does.
Yeah, I mean, I think those conversations are hard because at the end of the day, is a jury really going to lose respect for you because you brought somebody you knew you could beat to the end? I don't know of an instance that that would happen. I think that it probably would have been much more so a conversation of Michael or Connor versus anybody else or Victoria. I agree. I don't know. I find it hard that everybody before them says Michael's a threat, Michael's a threat. And they also don't have that feeling of, well, if we bring Michael to the end, we're going to look stupid. And that's what was surprising to me to see him get to the end, in my point of view. So I guess based off of that conversation, I think there would have been more talks of who goes versus a general consensus.
Well, I think ultimately people underestimated Michael's final tribal council ability, because like he calls himself awkward and a little antisocial as well, and so people may have the impression that like for example, Jonathan is a very good speaker. When he's passionate about what he wants to talk about, he's very good at articulating it. So maybe he's just like you said, the splitting of votes. Like, I need to take Victoria out. Me and Victoria played the same game, and if she's able to articulate even half as well as me, she may take a vote or two away from me, and those are votes that I need. She needs to go. I think in his mind, Michael doesn't take the votes that he is looking at currently.
So with final tribal scenarios, there's two ways to play it. Either you bring everyone the same, or you bring those people that are different from you so you can explain why your game was better. I feel if Jonathan and Victoria had sat in the end, it would have like counteracted for both of them because they were too the same and too intertwined. Where with not having Victoria there, Jonathan was able to be like, I worked very closely with Victoria. We were great. We did a lot of things together, but like I did this. And without Victoria giving a rebuttal of, wait, but what about these things? So I think Jonathan was right in cutting Victoria because he didn't have another option of the same. So if it was Jonathan, Victoria, McKenna, he could still inch his way of, I was the ringleader to these two.
Right.
But with Michael or Connor there, those are the outliers that we see in like a heroes versus villains scenario where Sandra is that outlier between two villains.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even though she is two, but
like even in that moment, they wouldn't know it. Even if it was those two and Connor, like I think it's still a split between those two. Like I just
yes,
this jury specifically was just never gonna be voting Connor's way.
mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that when we go into final tribal council, because I think we know specific instances where if he had an opportunity to win a vote that he lost it. And that's no offense to him or his game. Like, he played hard. He got to final three. Like, it's a deserving game to get to where he was. And I was very happy that he got to change his fortune in DCP, going from that final 12 curse, breaking it, and then getting to the end.
Yeah.
But right now, we're going to focus on Victoria. Victoria goes out in fourth place. The
Queen stays queen.
Yeah, the quote unquote robbed goddess of the season. What isn't there to say about Victoria? Like, she was hilarious. I loved her, like when she would get salty, and she's like, she had her very good quick wit and quirkiness. She was a loyal ally to her number one, chose a good number one to have in this game in Jonathan. And they worked extremely seamlessly with each other. It was incredible to watch. And I agree with the sentiment that up to this point, I think they are the best duo that we have seen in both our long games and our minis.
Yeah, I mean, we also got time to see them as a duo, where like you have an Eric and Kiley, where we didn't. What damage could they have done in a long game, you know? So like, yeah, I think they are one of the strongest alliances that we've had. as a duo 100%. But I do want to give credit to the Victoria McKenna scenes too, because those are just hilarious in themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Those were some of my favorite. Yeah. I mean, I think Victoria, I personally got to play with her. I loved playing with her as little as I did. I think the biggest thing for Victoria as she continues to play orgs is that she will always be perceived a threat right away, because when you talk to her, you pick up that she's smart. And then if she, you realize she's good at these games, then like it's too much for anybody to take her to final tribal. But I think she'll go far in most of the games that she plays like she did here. But there's something about Victoria that is very intimidating in these online platforms and probably in real life. I mean, exactly what you said. She is like, she's adorable, she's smart, she's witty, she's funny. She has all the makings of a threat, but also one of the best players we'll see in DCP, in my opinion.
Definitely improves her stock. Like if we ever did like a tier of like DCP players, like her status drastically shoots up. And it's not because she was a bad player before. She didn't have the opportunity to truly show it because of circumstances, essentially.
Because she didn't pick John.
Because she didn't pick John.
I will say this is one, like Victoria is a great example. We hear Ian say a lot in Exiles that placement isn't everything. Like you can play a good game and not win. And I think Victoria is a great, embodiment of this. Is she is a great player. Even though she didn't get to final tribal, she played a final tribal winning game. And that's why she goes at this point.
I almost feel like you could say that about this season in general. Like there's a case for just about anyone who made the jury phase of this game. And I'll just keep it in the close range. Like Victoria had winner upside. Despite what Mike says at Final Tribal Council, I think a similar thing would have happened. So let's say Jonathan somehow gets voted out there, and like my idea of like Michael and Victoria team up and vote Jonathan out in a 2. Well, I guess it would have been a 2-2. So then Michael like beats Jonathan at fire making or something. Whatever that challenge is, because I don't think there was one planned.
Is there ever one planned?
I mean, maybe. Maybe one day people will see what we have in store for fire making, but you have to keep tuning in to find out. But I think Jonathan could have done what McKenna did for Jonathan, where like when McKenna joined the jury was when people started to learn more about Jonathan's game. And then Victoria comes in and then they really start knowing his game more. I think if Jonathan goes, he would have been that same thing. Like we kept, I think Lilly, you mentioned in somewhere that no one had a like a cheerleader for them in the jury. I think Jonathan would have been a Victoria cheerleader. And I think what he would have said, especially with him being the last person to speak if he was the final jury member, I think would have weighed more on some people as they were going to the vote. So I don't believe Victoria was in the same position that Connor was in. And I also think she would have had a good chance at Final Tribal Council to win some people over. But with that, she goes in 4th place, a very deserving player. We were very lucky to have her come back for a second time.
Yes.
But
top tier.
But now it's time for our final 3. It's episode 15, the winner. And we do something different here, and I loved it. And it was they chose to all meet up with each other, have
the rites of passage.
Yeah, have their breakfast together for day 39 breakfast. And they do their own rites of passage. I love that, McKenna, that you brought in like the little black and white like confessional of each player as they went through it. It was a very touching experience that really helped like capture what this season was. And I'm glad that you gave it the time that I think it deserved for this finale.
Yeah, I I'm a big fan of the rites of passage in regular Survivor, and I'm sad that they don't do it anymore because it's like it brings back that these were people that helped you in some way get to where you are. So like pay tribute to them and pay like your thanks or whatever, even if you didn't get to know them, if they were voted off on a beach before they met you. Just it's a way to say thank you. You somehow got me to where I am now in this game. It was a pleasure being on the cast with you, et cetera, et cetera. So I loved that they took their time and like discussed their opinions with everyone that they had on the tribe with them. So it was a great time.
Lilly, what was your thoughts on the rites of passage?
Yeah, I am in the boat of loving them. I think that
Yes.
there are like two boats, right? No one's in the water. You either like them or you
Yes.
don't. And I like them. I think it also helps just like bring it full circle, right? You remember, it's easy to remember like the final 7, but who went out third? You know what I mean? They're just as important. So I thought
Julia.
it was fun.
I mean, well, technically, Micah, because Shea never was voted out.
All right, whatever, Alex.
He would have had his torch sideways. Austin style.
Yeah.
Not actually, though. But it was really cool going through that. But what I liked about it also is like you're starting to feel like the tease of what some people were thinking they were going to say at Tribal as they were talking about, especially when you got into the jury portion of the players in the rites of passage. And like you were hearing it from Jonathan, you were hearing it a little bit from Michael. And I was like, ooh, like with all of us knowing the result and like knowing how the vote was going to go out, it was sort of fun seeing that because I didn't watch this. This was my first time seeing the rites of passage video. And I was like, oh, I'm liking this. Like I'm very excited to see what they do. And that leads us going into Final Tribal Council. And we see I'll say, in terms of Final Tribal Council performances, I think Michael had an amazing Final Tribal.
They were right in Sahara Dunes to vote him out before that Final Tribal Council because, oof, I don't know if Alanis would have been the winner.
It's too hard to say there, but you giving him time also, like in a long game format, to really get that. Put his thoughts together, I think was very beneficial for him. Jonathan has a good one. It's not great, but it's good. Like he has his faults and he admits it himself that like there's parts of it he could have done better. Like he didn't need to be fully scripted and like reading off paper. Because like to me as a jury person, I would have found that a little disingenuine, even if he's saying stuff that is genuine. Because like, well, you're not looking at us. You're not looking at the camera talking to us about it. But we all deal with these things in our own way. And I think that was his best way of making sure his points got across.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite side of like, I want to get to know your entire game, especially if I'm like Andrew, who hasn't been here in a hot minute.
Right.
So like, I want to know everything. So I know if I was in the Final Tribal, I'd forget 90% of what I wanted to say. So him having it all written down and like going in order, I can get a sense of maybe do I want to change my question to him because I know all of these things now. So I didn't feel a disconnect with that. I appreciated that he took the time to write everything out versus Connor, who did not, while like giving that connection to us, but didn't have everything he really wanted to say.
Right. And so let's do that. Before I talk more about Michael and Jonathan, I am going to talk about Connor's because then this isn't digging on him. This isn't like picking fun. I like to look at these things as sort of like examples of because you learn stuff from what people do well, but you also learn from things that don't go your way. And it's sort of hard also watching him like in real time, realizing like, oh, I don't have any chance of gaining the respect of this jury. I maybe did not play the game that I thought I did because what's like I said earlier, all of them were playing under the radar games. the difference was Michael and Jonathan were very clearly able to articulate not just what the moves were or what they were claiming, but why they're claiming them. And I feel like Connor's were a little directionless. He was saying, I had control of this game, but didn't have the context to back it up.
Right.
He was just saying, oh, I led the votes. Like, they were scared of me. Well, why were they scared of you? Well, because I had a 50-50 coin. Like, okay, but why were they scared of you? He couldn't really dig past the surface level. And I will put some of that to age. Like, it's not all young people don't know how to think critically and react critically in real time. But he just was a little directionless with especially his opening statement. More than half of his opening statement had nothing to do with anything that a jury was going to find relevant to the game. Him talking about, oh, I was at school and I missed the email for a week, and I'm doing like the gambling thing's cool. Like, oh, I actually was doing poker.
Tie back it right into the theme.
Yeah, but like he should have tied it back into the theme. He didn't. Yeah. He was like, he could have found way if he was able to like truly take some time to think through his thoughts before he got to final tribal council. He could have found ways to talk about like, well, I needed to keep things close to my vest. That's why I played an isolated game, because I knew if I let people be near me for too long, then the things that got me in trouble in Exile Island, I was afraid would keep coming back. So I needed to keep myself concealed. Like, there's things like that he could have said that I think a jury, if they took a step back, maybe they still wouldn't have voted for him, but they would understand more why maybe he had to play the way that he did.
I think I needed to hear from Connor I was always pulled in for the vote. I was always the one where people were like, oh, let's go talk to Connor. We can grab Connor. He was always a very pivotal role in a lot of votes where his vote mattered on who went home in a scenario. Yeah. So if he just drew a little bit more on that one, I think he could have gotten at least 1 or 2 votes, maybe.
Potentially he could have gotten one from maybe like a Will, who like you saw was like, I'm trying to give you an easy question, like just give me something in return. I think with him it's a case of you have someone like Mike who's like, I want big moves. Like, that's the game I would play, is I want to make big moves. That's what I see as a winning game, taking big risks, big gambles. But what Connor's game should have been, like you were saying, McKenna, is like, I didn't have control. However, if people needed a majority to get a vote done, the only person that was the real like kingmaker was me. I was always that last vote that was enough to push over the edge. And then either everyone else would follow suit, or I was that deciding vote. Like, my vote was powerful in this game because it was needed. It wasn't just something that people took for granted, because I could have easily just swung the other way and changed the entire game up. So I think it's an issue of people thinking at Final Tribal Council, they had to claim that I own these moves. But there's a different thing of, oh, I orchestrated everyone's demise, and I was a decision maker in the aspect of my vote carried a little more weight because I was more fluid in the game. And it's easy for us to say.
Listen, I have never made a Final Tribal Council, so Connor already has one leg up on me. So like, I give him major props for even going through a Final Tribal Council. Like, he did great. Like,
oh yeah, he honestly, for someone who was only 17 at the time, like I think even his bad reactions to people were very calm, like for the most part. Like, I think he kept himself pretty well composed throughout the entire thing, because they were not easy on him.
Yeah. I will say, as someone who has also not had a great tribal council performance, I wish he had taken notes from my train wreck. Because I think if he had, he would have understood. Like, I think what Jonathan did is what Connor needed. Because I think Connor in his opening statement started a lot of good points, but couldn't like close them out. Like he brought up poker and he brought it up in his exit interview, had this great explanation on in poker, I do this, and this is what I was doing in the game. And I told him, I was like, if you had said that, you would have had my vote. So I feel like if he had had a paper and was less worried about the jury's reactions, because you can see
he's very obsessed.
Yeah.
He's very worried about how people are reacting to what he's saying, which is how I found myself when I was in my final tribal. I was not really listening to myself as I talked as much as I was watching everybody react to what I was saying. And then in my head being like, oh shit, this is like going downhill real fast. I don't have control of what's going on. You know, I don't know how to get it back. And I think we see that in Connor, and he needed to like have notes to focus on rather than people's reactions. Cause then I think the jury, you know, and they've apologized for this, but they took advantage of Connor's, not like falter, but like his second guessing in himself in the final tribal. We start to see them say, you know, don't cut me off, you know, all this and that. And I think had they also not kind of taken advantage of him being a little nervous, then it would have gone differently as well. But it's like after he tripped, he just couldn't get his step. And the jury, other than Will, was not very graceful in allowing him to get back up, in my opinion. I had a much nicer jury, in my opinion, and I think that made it harder on Connor in the long run.
Well, I mean, like you had someone in John who literally wanted you to just tell him to F off and he would have given you his vote. So yeah, they're different strokes for different juries, I guess. But so that wraps up Connor's game. He ends up in third place, doesn't get a vote. But third place is nothing to sneeze at. You know, it's like he earned his spot. Like he said, never had a vote cast against him. Maybe like his name was never truly around. Like there was a couple of rounds where people mentioned it, but it never got back to him because it never gained the opportunity. Never
because Ken kept winning.
Yeah, his tribe kept on winning, and he had a perfect voting record. Not a lot of people in DCP can say they went through the entire game and voted correctly every single time. Mm-hmm. So he is in like a little pantheon there of some other like elite players. So in those aspects, those are to be commended. Like it's very hard to do that. It shows that he was useful for people. So, you know, like I give him his kudos there. I'm glad that he got his second chance, still made some errors, but what person doesn't?
I don't think there's any like perfect game.
No. And he's someone who I still believe is, as he gets older and gets a little more life experience under him, we could see a whole different version of Connor that can make that final push.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I agree.
So it's time to talk about our final two. We're not going to go through question by question. Like Jonathan and Michael were going toe to toe this entire time, both giving great answers. It's this dichotomy of Jonathan who's trying to prove that he was the crux of everything that happened. He was the one who had the hit list, and his hit list went out to perfection. And there is proof of video evidence of this that wasn't shown, as Ian said, for obvious reasons. It sort of gives away the result. If he then gets to the end, you're like, well, they showed us that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This final two was great. I thought their final tribal council performances were amazing. I expected Jonathan's final tribal performance, but then was really captivated and surprised by Michael's.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where I might have whatever. That's where I might have leaned. That's the word.
Yeah.
Listen, it's been a day. That's where I would have went with, because he really sold himself at an angle that I didn't see. I didn't realize he was capable of, where Jonathan comes off so, eloquent and can talk, and he's played before, has strategy, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like Michael was the surprise in this.
I agree, because I think ultimately in the vote that we see, Jonathan wins 5-3. I think Michael won those 3 votes. I think outside of Kiley,
Outside of Kiley,
who wasn't going to vote for Jonathan, and it's her prerogative not to. Like, it's perfectly reasonable. Because I don't take that as like, oh, that was a bitter vote against. Jury management is a real thing.
Yep.
He didn't manage her the way that he needed to get her vote. But I do believe that Jonathan, and maybe due to a few others on the jury, lost Parker's vote. Because we hear in Parker as he's going to vote, he's like, I'm not going to do what people are telling me is the thing that I should do. I'm going to do a personal thing. And again, when you're on the jury, your vote can be based on anything.
Yep.
And he decided to make his vote based off of a personal moment that he had with Michael when Parker was at a low point. Michael was the person that was there for him, so he was rewarding that with a vote. And so we see this. We have a great 1-2 punch here in either direction. I ultimately believe, like, at the time I wasn't sure, because I didn't see a lot of Michael's confessionals or his game. I thought he had a great final tribal, but I was going into that thinking like, oh, Jonathan's going to be the clear front runner. And the fact that Michael did so well to make it that close, I give him so much respect. And like I said before, he improved his placement somehow between a mini margin, and a long game.
Yeah, the margin that he was able to improve, like, Alex has done so many stats. Like, I think the only other person to improve their placement returning is Bill, but Bill had so
much room
to improve. The fact that Michael had 3 spots that he could go up, like,
right. And like, the outside of obviously Connor and Victoria, who also improved drastically, but all 3 of them were pre-mergers in exile, come back and get their second chance, and they go a lot farther. Where I think Bill gets like 4th. Also, like, Bill gets 4th, Victoria gets 4th, Connor gets 3rd. Michael gets 2nd. Hey, and it just goes to show, if you want to improve your placement in DCP, if you go out for your second time, if things hit right, you could do drastically better. And I will still count 4th to 2nd place as drastically better, especially when you're like 2 votes away from winning the game. So that does like wrap up the season. I think it was a very good bookend for a very fun season. A lot of social chaos monkeys in here, and it was a thrill to watch. But that leads us to our MVPs, and we are getting to the wire. And I have the audience vote for our last episode, for episodes 11 and 12. That was rewarded by the audience to McKenna. So Yay! McKenna gets her 6th MVP of the season.
Yeah, go racking them up.
And now, though, it's time to do our MVPs for episodes 13, 14, and the finale. And we already have the audience vote. The pick is in. And the person receiving the audience MVP for the last recap is Michael, for surviving and that hell of a final tribal. He was rewarded the audience's MVP. But we got 3 more to give out.
Yes.
And we are going to start with Lilly. Let's crack into this. Who's your MVP?
So I'm going to agree with the audience here. I think Michael is going to get my MVP for 2 reasons. One, like you guys talked about, he had a great final tribal performance. But second is, I think the way he played this game, he played under the radar. He was seen as a threat. He was quiet. No one really knew how he was going to do at Final Tribal. And then he knocks it out of the park. It's almost like he was able to flip his game on its side right when he needed it to.
I mean,
And
he
so
is
I
a
think,
flipper. So.
yeah, I think
Not in
that's
this
really
game.
impressive. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Michael.
Hey, it's a solid pick, and we it has to go on record that I do love seeing his arc of being the flipper, the chaos of Sahara, to deciding like very realistically to be I'm going to be loyal this go around, sticking to it as best as he could, and getting the results show for themselves. But McKenna, who is your MVP?
I'm agreeing with Lily in the audience here. I've got to go with my boy Michael. I was so proud of him getting to that final tribal spot. And I think it isn't easy to have your game airing while you're playing another one, because you could be playing a totally different game like he was here, where he was like, I'm not going to flip. I'm not going to do the chaos move. I'm going to keep going steady. But people might have like preconceived notions of who you are based on episodes that are airing. So I think he did very well for the hand that he was dealt, and I'm giving it to Michael.
Hey, he deserves these MVPs. He actually came into tonight with 0 MVPs.
There you go.
Jumps all the way up to 3. But unfortunately, 3 is where it's going to remain. It was close, but I am going to lean with our winner in Jonathan. And it mainly, for me personally, his strategic game was one of the most fascinating games I got to watch as a DCP Prod member so far through all of our games. The fact he came into... and more specifically, his post-merge game. Because when he got to the merge, amongst Prod, we all had like confidence levels of players. And the person who was like the most sporadic and most influx was Jonathan. We had people that were like, oh, Jonathan's lined up to win. And we had people like, how? Like, where's his connections? How is he going to get there? And he kept proving all the, like, those people wrong. Like, I had him in the middle because I was like, I'm not sure which way this leans. Like, if Ruken stays together, he's toast. But he manages to crack that, keeps moving forward. His hit list goes off to perfection. He gets that win because of his gameplay. And I need to give him that respect and give him my MVP. So it's now time to show the results.
Who's the MSVSP?
Who's the MMVP, the most valuable player? It was a close one, but I'm going to go in order based off of everyone who received an MVP to give my own rites of passage in a way. Yes. So with 1 MVP apiece, we have Connor and Kiley. Then with 2 MVPs is Will. Then with 3 MVPs is Michael, and Andrew. It's fitting that the Mike and Michael stick together. Then that gets us to our final 3 of McKenna, Jonathan, and Victoria. In third place with 4 MVPs is Victoria. I love that for her. The growth.
Yes.
We did. I don't think we did MVPs for Exile. I'm not sure.
No, yeah, we
anymore.
did. It was just Jeremy and I who gave MVPs. And you're damn straight. I gave Victoria an MVP right before she left.
Oh, yep. You are right. So in second place with 5 MVPs was Jonathan. So our MMVP for Monte Carlo, our second long game, McKenna Inglis with 6 MVPs. Congratulations, McKenna. You earned it. Congratulations to everyone who earned MVPs and everyone who didn't earn MVPs, because you all were rock stars in your own way.
Yes.
It's just how things roll. But with that officially wraps up the recaps for Monte Carlo. It has been a pleasure doing the recaps for the long games, and I'll most likely continue to do the long game recaps. However, for our next season that's going to be coming up in the future, Trinity Falls, our 5th mini, I will not be here because I'll be with McKenna and Lilly
Us
doing
three.
the exits. Since I joined as host for the minis, I'll be doing the exits, and John David Millsip will be spearheading the recaps in my stead for the minis for the time being. It's been awesome getting to dissect all these episodes, and I can't wait to dissect Trinity Falls through the exits. But McKenna, anything that we need to wrap up with?
Yeah, stay tuned for Trinity Falls. It's going to be coming your way sometime this summer, but I need a little bit of a break between seasons, so we will get that coming out to you soon. Make sure to follow all of our socials to keep up to date with when we are airing those seasons. For cast reveal posts, follow our Instagram. Everything will be on the end card, but it's pretty much just DCP_org. So yeah, I'm excited for what's upcoming, but I'm also sad that this is over because we have been with these characters since January.
Yeah.
And it's been a really long time with this group of people, and they're great, all of them. So
yeah, but I do want to just give, before we sign out, I want to thank this cast for providing this season. You guys all played amazing. It was so fun to watch, so fun to edit, and so fun to recap. I want to thank all production for everything that we do behind the scenes to make sure this season goes off well. And I got to thank Ian and Morgan for all the hard work that they do to organize and create their long seasons. It's the most authentic Survivor you can get in an org form. So that wraps up, finally, Monte Carlo. Thank you, Lilly. Thank you, McKenna. This has been Dynamic Character Productions, and we'll see you for Trinity Falls.
yeah.
Good night, everybody.